Hey there, Jake here from CVP. Today we are taking a look at two new mirrorless cameras from Canon, the R1 and the R5 Mark II. Canon were kind enough to invite me over to their press event in Munich to get some hands-on time with the cameras. However, this won't affect my opinion at all, and Canon has had no input on this video or my thoughts. I managed to get a few hours of hands-on time with the cameras and try them out in a few different situations at BMW Park. We will be sprinkling shots from them both throughout the video, but just a note that these are not final production units, so image quality may change. Anyway, let's start off by taking a look at the R5 Mark II, which actually features a brand new full-frame 45 megapixel backside illuminated stacked sensor, which Canon are combining with their Digic X and their new Digic Accelerator processors, resulting in Canon's most powerful EOS image processing to date. This improved processing should result in faster readout speeds and overall performance. Canon isn't telling us concrete numbers for the readout speeds of these cameras. As soon as we get a production unit in, we'll be running it through our readout tool. Canon has rated the dynamic range of the R5 Mark II and R1 at 16 plus stops. And I know plenty of people will be very happy to hear that both of these new cameras feature C-Log 2, as well as a range of other custom picture profiles, including Canon 709, C-Log 3 and HLG, but unfortunately no YDR. Though YDR is possible to get in camera by converting a C-Log 2 YDR transform LUT to a look file with a new tool made by Canon and then importing it into the camera. I'm not really sure why Canon chose to do it this way instead of just using regular LUTs, but at least you have the option to do this now. The R5 and R5C were limited to just C-Log 3, so C-Log 2 is great to see here, and should hopefully mean that the R5 Mark II has improved dynamic range over those two cameras. In C-Log 2, the cameras both have a base ISO of 800. The R5 Mark II has a max extended ISO of 51200, whereas the R1 can go all the way up to 102,400. Overall though, I think the R5 Mark II performs decently well in low light, but I don't think quite as well as the R1. But given its much lower resolution to the R5 Mark II, this isn't too surprising. The R1 looks really good from the low light stuff that we managed to capture. The internal RAW that these cameras can capture is 12-bit, and there are a good range of 42 10-bit options to choose from as well. This means you have the option to get great looking colours in camera or take it to post and really dial in the look you want. I personally really like Canon's colours, and their RAW can be pushed and pulled in post well too. Both cameras feature an optical low pass filter, which should help balance detail with aliasing. However, the one in the R1 is more complex than the one found in the R5 Mark II. The images that the R5 Mark II can capture, just like the previous R5, are incredibly detailed. Canon will be releasing a new DPP plugin for Lightroom, which will bring these new features and an improved debayering algorithm. This is good, as previously you could get better images when processing RAWs through Canon's programs versus something like Lightroom. But obviously a lot of people processing images would still choose to go through Lightroom because of the convenience and feature set. So soon you won't have to make that compromise, which is awesome. The R5 Mark II can shoot in a pretty large range of resolutions and formats. This includes Cinema RAW and the new S-RAW. Cinema RAW is available in standard and light in 8K, and S-RAW allows you to record in 4K, which is going to be very helpful for a lot of people, as not everyone will want the massive data rates and post-processing challenges that come with the 8K RAW. S-RAW has all of the regular parameters when you hit post as Canon's existing Cinema RAW, but it is doing some line skipping trickery in camera to reduce the resolution while still using the same field of view as the 8K RAW and giving you RAW parameters. This means that you'll definitely see a reduction in resolution between this and the full 8K, but we will take a look at how much in our longer, more detailed video about the R5 Mark II when we get a production camera in. However, even in this quick side-by-side, you can see how much more aliasing the S-RAW has versus the full 8K RAW. You can shoot both 8K RAW light and 4K S-RAW up to 60 frames per second, and you can go up to 120 in 4K and 240 in 2K when in the compressed modes. But this doesn't oversample, which is limited to 60p in 4K. This is still a good set of options to have, and you can also record these frame rates with sound now as well. The R5C could also do 8K 60, but the R5 Mark II can do so internally with no need for external power, which is thanks to the new LPE6P battery, which we'll talk about more in a bit. You can also shoot a range of compressed formats: XFHEVC, XFHEVC-S, XFAVC and XFAVC-S, using a few combinations of H.264, H.265, intra and long GOP compression. It's a really solid selection with a good range for what different productions need. You can also downsample in camera on the R5 Mark II and the R1 by selecting the fine modes in their format lists. This will be a good option for people wanting to take advantage of the resolution of the sensor without having to actually record 8K or shoot in RAW. Compared to the 4K SRAW, I actually think this 4K downsampled XF looks better, but obviously you don't get the RAW parameters with it. The cameras both also have a crop mode which will unlock another set of recording options and give you the ability to use lenses that won't cover the full sensors. One of the first questions I had for Canon was how the R5 Mark II was going to handle overheating, as the original R5 was quite limited at launch, but did see recording time improve over the years with new firmware. The R5 Mark II does have an improved internal layout compared to the original R5, but will have limited recording times versus something like the R5C, which has a much more robust cooling system. However, the R5 Mark II will have 3 new optional grips, one regular one with Ethernet, and one that offers active cooling. The cooling grip also has Ethernet on it, but for some reason no portrait controls, which I presume was a hardware limitation. For video shooters, this cooling grip is definitely worth taking a look at. This connects to the camera just like a normal grip, but it has an active cooling fan which pulls air from the front of the grip through the camera and out the side, helping dissipate heat. You can control the behaviour of the fan in the menu. There is a mode to toggle on only during standby and turn off when recording, and then constantly on settings for low, medium and high. When in the standby mode and when on high, it can get quite loud, but it does a good job from the time I spent using it. This paired with the ability to change the auto power off temperature from standard to high can improve times quite substantially. Here are some Canon provided figures, but this is something I want to test when we get our hands on a full production unit. This is a really cool addition from Canon, and for more video focus shooters, grabbing this grip could really help with the performance. Looking at Canon's internal testing figures, it shows that using the grip does give you a substantial improvement in a few modes, but not really in 8K 60. I used the camera with and without the grip throughout the day, but mostly with the grip on, and I didn't have any issues with the camera turning off. However, when you're getting close to it overheating, it will give you a warning and also turn the time remaining on the monitor yellow, so you know that you're getting close to overheating at a glance. Fortunately, the R5 Mark II doesn't require any external power to get any of the features in the camera, unlike the R5C. This is thanks to the new battery that it uses, the LPE6P, which is rated at the same 2130 mAh as the LPE6NH, but features a continuous discharge rate of 6 amps. In short, you will need to use these if you want the full power of the R5 Mark II, but you can use other LP6 batteries. It will just disable the following features. Thanks to the new processors and battery, the R5 Mark II actually has improved battery life over the previous R5, resulting in roughly a 30% improvement on the amount of images you can take per battery. During the day shooting with the R5 Mark II, I went through 2 LPE6Ps, which is pretty good considering I've shot video 90% of the time. You can power the camera and charge the battery with the correct LPE6 with the USB-C on the side of the camera, which I did towards the end of the day to top it up. The R1 has been teased by Canon for a while now, and it's good to finally see their new flagship mirrorless camera in person. The R1 has clearly been designed for sports, wildlife and news gathering photographers. It's all about speed, and it certainly has plenty of that. It's a pretty insane camera to use, and was really good at capturing the basketball that we managed to shoot. It features a brand new 24 megapixel backside illuminated stacked sensor, which is paired with the same new processing as featured in the R5 Mark II. And while it's definitely focused on being a stills camera primarily, it does have some pretty decent video specs. When it comes to recording formats, the R1 can shoot 6K RAW up to 50p and 60 in light RAW, as well as the same mix of XF formats as the R5 Mark II. It can also downsample when in the 4K fine mode up to 60fps, and can record up to 120 in the regular 4K mode and 240 in 2K or Full HD. This is a very decent set of options again to choose from, and while the R1 is definitely going to be mainly used for stills, it could be used for video too. The main thing to consider though if you're looking at this for video is its high price tag, which positions it above dedicated video cameras like the FX6 and C400. Both the R5 Mark II and R1 feature Canon's most up-to-date and powerful autofocus system, which they are calling Intelligent Dual Pixel AF. This uses new processing power to add a bunch of new features and tracking capabilities for both stills and video. With this new system comes a bunch of new updates and tweaks as well. First off, the subject detection has been updated, which now includes horses, aeroplanes and trains. We spent most of our time with the cameras filming and photographing sports, so we didn't get a chance to test these new modes out, but both cameras locked onto people really well. Canon has also added a new action priority mode, where a deep learning algorithm will predict where the action in the scene is going to be for 3 sports currently: football, basketball and volleyball. It does this by analysing the people and ball in the frame in real time. With basketball being one of the sports that it can do this with, it makes sense that Canon took us to capture some, and I think both cameras did a really good job in this situation. Both new cameras have a sensor level change that will improve the performance of the autofocus as well, and that is the addition of cross-type points, which means that the cameras can now detect horizontal lines as well as portrait, which will result in better performance and, more importantly, more consistent performance when in landscape and portrait mode. This wasn't on previous cameras and is a smart change. Both cameras also have autofocus points crammed across their entire frame, which means you can run whole area tracking AF when using continuous servo focus, which is great for video. Up next is a new registered person priority mode which has been added to both cameras. This allows you to input a face from an image, and when the camera recognises that person in your scene, it will prioritise focusing on that subject. The autofocus in these cameras is seriously impressive. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel, and if you want to buy anything you see in this video or any other filmmaking or photography gear, head over to cvp.com where our experienced team is waiting to help you. Both cameras feature Canon's latest in-body image stabilization system. This is physical sensor stabilization that is rated to provide up to 8.5 stops of stabilizing power in the center of frame and 7.5 stops in the corners. And the stabilization does look good on these cameras. I shot a lot with a fully manual Cooke SP3, and both cameras did a good job at smoothing things out, and with an optically stabilized lens, the performance is even better. They are both running a version of Canon's stills camera operating system, which is quite different from their Cinema EOS system, which you can find in the R5C's video mode and other Cinema EOS cameras. This does mean that they are limited in video features compared to a Cinema EOS camera, but fortunately Canon have added the ability to use both false colour and a waveform for exposure, which are great additions. It does make sense for them to be running this menu system, and it means that you can very quickly switch between video and photo mode. They still have a good range of features, and you get the same awesome autofocus performance in video mode as you do for stills. Pre-record for both stills and video has also been added. For video, you can cache 3 to 5 seconds of footage into an internal cache, which is then extended onto your clip. For stills, it's the same kind of process, but with 15 to 20 stills being buffered and then captured before you hit the shutter. For certain productions like wildlife sport and documentary coverage, this will be an awesome addition, and the fact it's not using your cards but an internal cache means that your media won't get destroyed by the constant writing and deleting. They also both feature a full-size HDMI port now, which is a really welcome change from the micro HDMI found on Canon's previous cameras. The HDMI can also output ProRes RAW up to 8K 30, which could be helpful if you'd rather shoot that than the internal RAW options. You will also be able to record internally while outputting RAW, which is nice. The R5 Mark II features a single CF Express Type B card slot and UHS-2 SD card slot. The R1 has 2 Type B CF Express card slots. When it comes to audio, both cameras have the ability to record 4-channel LPCM 24-bit, and thanks to them both featuring Canon's multi-shoe, you can use their range of audio accessories with them, like their top mics and Tascam XLR top unit. This would be a good option for people wanting a slightly more professional set of audio inputs than the included 3.5mm on the body. Both cameras are very well featured when it comes to connectivity as well, with built-in Wi-Fi and Ethernet options. They also both support the News MLG2 metadata standard, which will be good for news, event and sports productions that want to use it. The metering zones in the cameras have been improved, with them now featuring 6,144 zones, which should improve exposure metering and white balance accuracy. These 2 new bodies can also use the aperture ring of Canon's hybrid lenses in their stills modes, which other mirrorless cameras can't. Fingers crossed Canon releases firmware for their older RF cameras to allow aperture ring control in stills modes, as I'm sure it's something that some photographers want to take advantage of. The R5 Mark II features a slightly redesigned body compared to its predecessor. It looks far more like an R6 Mark II. You have the same video photo mode switch and on-off button. I think it is much nicer now, and if you've used previous EOS R cameras, it's still going to be very familiar to use. They also both have tally lamps when you're recording video. They are both built incredibly well and are dust and water resistant. The EVFs on both of these cameras are pretty awesome, but the R1's is definitely a step above the R5 Mark II. However, compared to the R5 Mark II's one is about twice as bright. Both cameras also have an updated version of Canon's eye control system. This was first introduced on the R3, but has been improved here with these new cameras. It uses an array of sensors to track your eye looking at the image in the viewfinder and adjust the focus accordingly. It definitely felt snappier in these new cameras, and I personally would love to see this feature brought into their video modes as well. The R5 Mark II is aimed at being a hybrid camera that can handle shooting both stills and video well, whereas the R1 is definitely more focused towards photography. However, they both have some pretty impressive specs for photography. In their electronic shutter modes, the R5 Mark II can shoot raw stills up to 30 frames per second, and the R1 can go up to 40. You can fine-tune this max frame rate in camera if you don't want to shoot at the highest rates, as this can result in a lot of shots very quickly. Both cameras can shoot continuously blackout free as well, but this does result in a slight increase in viewfinder image latency. They also both feature an in-camera upscaler and noise reduction tool. This currently processes JPEGs in camera and upscales them using a deep learning algorithm Canon have implemented. This means you can get images up to 179 megapixels in the R5 Mark II and 96 megapixels in the R1. This also applies a noise reduction pass as well, which should improve noise by about 2 stops. This will also be coming to post-production Canon tools, which will be able to use the RAW files for this process, so I'm intrigued to see what the results will be when using the RAW over the JPEG. This has been a bit of a fast first look at these two new cameras, so I might not have covered everything as thoroughly as I would have liked, but they are both really exciting releases from Canon that I've really enjoyed using, especially the R5 Mark II, which could be a pretty attractive option for many hybrid shooters out there. It's also really great to see Canon releasing some new products after a bit of a quiet period. The R5 Mark II is going to be priced at £4,500, and the R1 comes in at just under £7,000. And they, as well as their new accessories that have come out with them, are available to pre-order now on our website. The R5 Mark II should be available around August and the R1 around November. It's been a busy few days putting this video together, so if you have any further questions about it that we might have missed, let us know in the comments below. And if you liked the video, we'd really appreciate if you gave it a like and maybe consider subscribing so you don't miss out on our awesome upcoming content. And thank you so much for watching.